Sports Beat Radio, presented by Indy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Looks over the middle, second guesses, fires, throws. Does he make the catch in the end zone? Yes! Touchdown! Oladipo to win it.
Another one!
He got
Another
it!
one! Another one! Huge hole! He's at the 30! He's gonna go! 10, 5, touchdown! Jonathan Taylor!
Worked out by Burke. Bounces into Cody, puts it up, scores!
Now, from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios, here's your host, Jim Coyle.
Hello, everybody. Welcome in on this Wednesday. We've reached the midway point. Dylan Sinn with us from the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette. Dylan, how you doing, brother?
I'm good, Jim. I'm good. Thanks for having me on, as always. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Saw you up there briefly. Didn't get a chance to talk to you at Big Ten Media Days last week in Indianapolis, but saw you there running around as that event happened, which was fun. We've talked about that a ton. Kyle Neddenriep will be on with us today as well. Bob Kravitz, all kinds of things going on in the Colts world, in the vaccine world, the Olympics going on. Simone Biles is out. All kinds of things happening newsworthy-wise in the sports world, but that's what they do, man. We got to have it happening every day, or it'd be boring time for us.
Oh, absolutely. You know, there's always content for us. That's the important part of sports, is making sure that we personally have something to talk about. That's why everyone in sports does what they do.
Absolutely. Simone Biles, of course, pulling out of the all-around in the Olympics. That's a little bit of a surprise, a big surprise. Expected to defend her title. Lily King has won bronze, but we were hoping to see a gold for her. So not everything is working out perfectly, but it is what it is. Dwayne says hi. You guys feel free to reach out on the Andy Moore Honda hotline, as Dwayne has done. Chandler, Indiana. There we go. Cool. And Dylan's up are you in Fort Wayne?
I am in Fort Wayne. Yes, sir.
It's too north.
Yeah, it is. It's warm up here, man. We have it's been 90 the last 3 days in a row now. We're headed for 90 again today. So I may be north, but it's not any cooler than you guys down there.
Big deal. Good enough. What have you been following?
I've mostly been working on Tin Caps stuff recently. The Fort Wayne Tin Caps, our minor league team here, doing a lot of that, and also getting ready for college football season and high school football season. We have previews coming out all over the next few weeks here. Of course, we're getting ready for camp, training camp to start for the college teams here sometime next week, more than likely. So, it's been kind of all over the place, just getting things ready for the season. That in itself is basically a whole several weeks worth of work, is just getting everything ready for the season to go. And that's one of my favorite times of the year, is kind of talking to a lot of people, what they think of their team. Everyone's 0-0. So you kind of get coaches talking about what they think their team can be, what they're excited about, and which players they're really hoping to see thrive this year. And it's been fun doing that over the last few days here, as I really start diving into that.
Yeah, looking forward to college football. We've been talking a lot about that, obviously, as we've just gotten back from Big Ten Media Days last week, which was awesome in and of itself, as I've said, getting to go to that live. But getting to talk to the coaches, trying to get a feel for what the Big Ten is going to be like. Of course, we know Ohio State, so we always start there with the Big Ten East. But it's going to be a curiosity this year on who's going to challenge in the West, who can challenge in the East. Of course, Indiana and Penn State, of course, have been looked upon, the teams in the East, to challenge Ohio State, which is ironic because it's not Michigan. In the West, of course, we expect it to be Wisconsin and Iowa, because who else is there? But we don't know. You've got the drama of Nebraska with Scott Frost. So it's hard to tell on the Big Ten. And then once we get past that, we'll have conference realignment to talk about. There's just so much going on. It's nuts.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, in the Big Ten, it's interesting. to me, it seems like the Big Ten East, we assume Ohio State's going to win the Big Ten East. However, it might be beyond that, more open than any time I can remember since this conference began, because last year everyone assumed it was going to be Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan in some order, like it always is. And this year, it seems more likely that we're going to have some combination of Ohio State, IU, Penn State. We don't know where Michigan's going to be. We don't even really know where Penn State is going to be, because they weren't quite particularly good last year. We don't know how good Maryland's going to be. They seem to be a program on the rise. And then in the West, you have, as you said, Wisconsin and Iowa. We don't really know how good Wisconsin's going to be. They have an untested quarterback. We don't really know how good Northwestern can be. They returned plenty of talent from a team that won the division last year. Purdue seems to be excited by how good they can be after kind of an injury-plagued last couple of years. And then it just seems like there's plenty of teams out there that could really make a run. I mean, even Minnesota, they were really good 2 years ago, took a step back last year. And of course, as you said, Nebraska, we don't really know. Scott Frost said he's the most excited by this team that he's been in his tenure, which, take that with a grain of salt. It's Big Ten Media Day. But also, they're a team that has won 10 games many times in the last decade or so. And it's just a question of when they wake up, and maybe this is the year they do that. So I think this might be, especially with Ohio State, with Justin Fields leaving and with some questions on defense for the first time in a while, maybe the conference is as wide open this year as it's been in quite a while, even though Ohio State remains the team that everyone's chasing.
Caden Curry just completed a visit. Not much coming out of his camp about his visit. He's staying pretty close to the vest, as Indiana is one of the 5 teams on his list. But of course, those other 4 teams, of those 4 teams, I think that I figured up they've won 7 out of the last 9 national championships. That between Clemson, Ohio State, and Alabama, of course. That's a tough one to beat, but it's not unbeatable. We've seen these Indiana recruits go to work. You never know. It did not work for Joe Strickland, but that seems like a different situation. I was rather surprised to see that recruitment go the way that it did, but that may be academics driven. Who knows? Specific area of study, whatever the case may be. But it's going to be interesting if Indiana could complete that. Man, oh man, they're already in a top 20 class, which is uncharted territory for Indiana already. If you could add to that, man, I guess I don't need to tell you, that just makes the ball roll down the hill faster.
Yeah, and you're right about Strickland. It's interesting, when he committed to Purdue, he said that he didn't envision ever going to an in-state school. He thought he wanted to go somewhere else because Stanford was the 3rd team on his list. It was IU, Purdue, and Stanford were his top 3. But he then he said he decided he wanted to, if he went to Stanford, he wouldn't be able to go anywhere and see his brother's games, play basketball. So that was part of the decision there. But also, you're right. IU just got a commitment the other day from another 4-star running back. That's the 4th 4-star recruit in this class. They're now up to number 18 in the country, according to 24/7 Sports. So this is a team. This is a class that obviously is already beyond anything that Indiana has had in the recruiting rankings era. There's a chance they finish with a top 25 class, which, as I said it the other day, and you just said it, would be a seismic change for this program. They never ranked higher than 36th in their history, at least since 2000, when these recruiting rankings began. But there were times in the late 2000s, the early 2010s, where they were pulling in classes that were ranked 65th, 70th, 75th in the country. And to now have a class that is ranked 18th, has a chance at finishing in the top 25, especially if they somehow pull this out and get Curry, that is just a seismic shift for a program. And it's just, it is remarkable to see how quickly things can change. If you put a couple of good seasons together, you get a few breaks, and people start realizing this is a program I want to be in. And now the important thing, of course, as we've said many times on this show, is to go out and win some games. Show these recruits, and even Caden Curry is probably not going to commit before the season begins. Show Caden Curry you can win some games and build on what you did last season. And I think that's going to be important for this class as well.
Well, it's going to be important. Yeah, exactly. For a lot of reasons, to get and continue fan support, to get and continue recruiting base, but that is obviously there. They were getting the guys to come in and buying into what the vision is, because it's proven to be coming through. But yeah, the wins have to come. But I think that happens this year. Of course, a lot of that falls on the shoulders of keeping Michael Penix healthy. Had we seen a healthy Michael Penix last season, the results, although they were very good, much better than they were last year. Man, I don't think they lose that bowl game. But you can predict all you want to predict and say how this and that would have been, but we'll see. But yeah, man, it would be really, really interesting to see a season where he stays healthy, because you want to talk about a strong division. Again, the Big Ten East with Ohio State, a strong Indiana team, a strong Penn State team. Those are probably the three strongest teams in the Big Ten, period. I can't think of a West team that is showing signs of being in that level. Not at least not to my knowledge.
Yeah. I mean, again, Wisconsin, people seem to be high on Wisconsin this year. I'm skeptical. Their defense is probably going to be very good, as it was last year. But they don't really have a whole lot on offense to write home about at this point. There are guys that they're hoping can break out. But last year, the offense had a couple good games, one against Illinois and one against a Michigan defense that was maybe the worst Michigan defense I've ever seen in my life, including the 3-9 team in 2008. But against Indiana and against some of these other teams they played against, they were not particularly good. Like, I mean, Indiana held them to 6 points. Indiana's defense was good last year, but it wasn't world beating. Like they had some very good players. It was a good defense, but you're holding Wisconsin to 6 points. Graham Mertz is a guy who people expect a lot of. He was a 4.5-star recruit, essentially, and he hasn't quite put it together yet, and they're expecting him to be the guy this year. Well, and so that's Wisconsin. And then, as you said, there's a bunch of question marks. Nebraska, Minnesota, Northwestern. Iowa is the one that seems to be the most likely to challenge for that division title, but again, we don't know. So yeah, you're right. It's way up in the air. I wouldn't sleep on Michigan either. That's a team that has a ton of talent on offense. If they get some good quarterback play, they can play a bunch of games where both teams score 50 and they win some. So there's I wouldn't sleep on them either. They've put together some good recruiting classes as well, and there's reason to believe they'll bounce back just like Penn State will. So it's wide open.
I think Michigan's going to be one of those teams that's very, very tough at home with 110,000 people in their pocket, and a mediocre team on the road. We'll see how that turns out. But, plenty more to get to. Bob Kravitz will join us later. Kyle Neddenriep. A lot of change over the high school landscape as well. Coaches changing. So we'll get to that as well. Stay tuned. Indiana Sports Beat. Back with more right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Hey, Hoosier fans, whether you're What you been working on, Dylan?
Basically a lot of high school, college preview stuff, tin caps, and then obviously the Big Ten Media Day, writing stories off of that. I wrote a story in Sunday's paper, kind of about Ohio State and basically how everyone's chasing them.
Hey, we got 10 seconds. Kyle Neddenriep should be joining us shortly too. So here we go.
Clubhouse, Sam's Restaurants, professionals in the art of food and drink. This segment is brought to you by Sam's Family of Restaurants. Fresh, local, family. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington. Here's Jim Coyle.
Welcome back to Indiana Sports Beat on this Wednesday. Dylan Sinn joining me from the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette. Hope your week's off to a good start.
Absolutely.
Ours is. It's been a warm one. It's going to cool off here, but man, it's been a sticky week so far this week. It's good to not be in a helmet and shoulder pads. I'm sure that most guys are thinking right now that would not be fun, but we are getting closer and closer to that part of the year. Kyle Neddenriep joins us now from the Indy Star. Cal, how you doing? I was just thinking about those days of high school two-a-days, man, getting closer and closer, but those days are gone. Do they even have? They don't have two-a-days anymore, do they?
No, it's those days. I remember those days as well. And you go have a really hard morning practice and go home and eat lunch, and then normally the second one wasn't quite as intense, but they'd really try to weed out the the week in those first. I think they went on for like 2 weeks back in the day, but
yes, they did. That's what exactly. It was like Navy SEAL training.
Yeah,
who's staying and who's going? Man, yeah, that was not a fun time in life for those of us that went through that. But yeah, I think that has ended. The great stories of Paul Bear Bryant when he was at Texas A&M. What did he call? What those guys are known as something. It was brutal.
Yeah. I can't remember.
I can't think of the name. Something Junction Boys or something.
Junction Boys. Yeah, that's what it was.
Was that it?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh! You want to talk about brutal, man? Whew.
I think we're a little smarter now. I mean that was even by when I was playing in the '90s, they'd at least give you water. I think Bear Bryant was withholding water from those guys. So I think we've learned a lot about keeping people healthy and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's the real practice for high school football start next week. And, we're kind of in a day and age now where you can practice really, throughout the summer. So that first day isn't quite as big of a deal, I would say, because teams have been practicing and doing things as a team throughout the summer. But, still it's a kind of a tip off or a kickoff, I guess, in football terms to the fall season, and all that sort of gets started next week, and we're getting right down to getting ready for the football season now, and I certainly am, and I'm sure Dylan is too, and looking forward to another great season of football.
Yeah, that's one of the funnest things. It kicks off everything, kicks the school year off, but especially as this year comes back around, getting fans back in the stands. We've talked about that for college, but for high school as well. Getting to get back out and watch your kid play. It's a whole different deal than what we went through last year, hopefully. But it changes things. I was talking about, Michigan's kind of looking like a middle of the road team, but you put 110,000 people in the stands, that changes things. I don't care how good your team is.
Yeah, and you wonder, I didn't think we'd be looking at color-coded maps anymore, and then yesterday we're kind of back to looking at counties and where they're at with their rates and everything, and gosh, it seemed like we were getting beyond that point. It's just so frustrating that this Delta variant seems to be a real issue, and so you kind of wonder. I did talk to Paul Neidig last week and I'll have a story coming kind of about, some of the different things about his first year as commissioner. And they did alter the transfer rules some, and probably more to come with that. But I talked to him about and they'll keep an eye on the, okay, it's kind of left up really not to the IHSA, but the local, the local schools as far as what their counties are doing. And, I know Ben Davis decided to, they started school today, and they are going to have masks on kids. And, I know some schools aren't planning for that, but plans may change based on CDC and that sort of thing. I really thought we'd be beyond this, even 2 weeks ago. And, it's just, it's frustrating. My youngest son, their little league team made the Great Lakes Regional. They have to all get tested before they, get into the regional. If even one of them tests positive, they're not able to even play in the regional. And that's, for 12-year-old kids, and some of the kids aren't even 12 yet. They can't even get the vaccination yet. So, it's kind of a crapshoot, really. And the way it has contagious as this variant seems to be, it makes you wonder about crowds and things like that. I really do think we're going to have a normal football season as far as crowds go. At least that's the plan anyway. But as we all know throughout this, I mean, things change, and we're a year and a half or whatever into this now, and it just seems to be like, just goes on and on and on. So I felt pretty good about it a couple weeks ago. Now it's the news and the rates and stuff seems to be getting a little bit worse and more worrisome.
You mentioned the Great Lakes region. That brings up the Little League World Series, something else we didn't get to see last year. But, man, the Great Lakes teams from Indiana having always seemed to have a little success there. And you mentioned your son on a team there. Where are they? Where are we in the tournament?
They just finished their state. They won state on Sunday up in Munster. They won a 1-0 over Silver Creek. My son's on Brownsburg, and my older son, they actually lost to Silver Creek 2 years ago in the state finals. So kind of interesting. Younger brother gets the bragging rights, I guess, in that situation. But they're going to be playing next August 9th. They have a bye. They play the winner of Michigan and Wisconsin, I want to say. And there's 6 teams in that regional. It's played up at Whitestown. There's a new stadium right there off 65. Looks pretty. I haven't seen it up close, but it looks pretty nice. And so the 6 teams from the Great Lakes, and then the Midwest also plays their regional there too. So it's kind of going on simultaneously. Midwest is like, Iowa, Nebraska, Missouri, some of those states also come here. So, and then the top 2, because this year the Little League's a little bit different. They're not having international teams at Williamsport. So actually the top 2 teams in each regional will go to Williamsport. And, you're getting all these emails from Little League, the parents, as all this, I had, no idea, what all this goes into this, but, basically your kid goes into a hotel, and then, if they keep winning, you may not even see them, up close for like 3 weeks if they go to Williamsport. So
it's like American Idol, baby.
And they take them directly from there to Williamsport, so, and Little League pays for all this stuff. So it's pretty cool. But yeah, but with school starting, it kind of complicates things slightly. You're starting school and then missing a little bit, and then hopefully not too much though. So it's fun. It's a, once in a lifetime type of thing. So hopefully they, have time to enjoy it.
Heck yeah. You're going to Hollywood, which is set in Logansport. Heck yeah, man. That'd be cool as hell. I had to throw that up there from RBO Sprint. Morning, everyone. He was late to the show. He had to do some fence repair from a bear visit overnight. I think he lives down in Georgia, but yeah, that was to throw that up there. Yeah, that's great fun. I didn't remember the Little League World Series going that late into that late into August. That'll roll over right into when Indiana's down in the Bahamas playing basketball. We'll be into fall camp for football. The high schools will be in action. I mean, it's just everything's about to kick into gear here.
Yeah, I mean, I always remember that Little League championship would be played like the same day. Like, remember they used to have the Pigskin Classic in the early they'd play like an early college football game that was kind of the kickoff to the season. There was like, some years is the Eddie Robinson Classic. They always used to have that, that single game, and it would be the same day as the Little League championship game. And, I was, as a kid, I always remember watching the Little League World Series would only be on, that one game. It'd be, and it'd be like, man, I remember as like a 10 to 12-year-old, like, how do you get in this? How do you, it'd be so cool to play in something like that. And so I'm a little bit jealous of he gets a chance to at least be close to making it to that point. But yeah, it does. But school used to start later, so I think that's where it's a little different is now, all these schools, or a lot of them are basically balanced calendar. So you're starting in late July instead of late August. So that's where the summer is kind of condensed down to, like 6 to 7, 8 weeks at the most. So that's a little bit different than it used to be.
Dylan, we're getting closer and closer to high school football starting as well. Like you said, Fort Wayne, a big area there. You had just had something out, Kyle, about Mr. Football candidates. Were any of them up from the Fort Wayne area? I don't remember.
Yeah, we had the young quarterback from Fort Wayne Lures. I put him in that mix. He had, they made the state championship game last year. And put up, as Dylan knows, put up a lot of yards, a lot of touchdown passes, and I think we included maybe a name or two other in the next level, but Clark, right, Dylan?
Yeah, Carson Clark, from Lures. Yeah, I covered their, I believe it was their regional championship game. They were down something like 21-28-0, and they came back and won at home. That was one of the most exciting football games I've ever covered. He was absolutely fantastic in that game. And he just, it was obvious that, because he wasn't great at the beginning of the season, and it was just obvious by the end of the year that he had just improved by leaps and bounds, and the entire team had just kind of rallied behind him. So yeah, after a full off season of that, I'm sure they'll be very, very good this year.
And they always play such a tough schedule. They play, larger 6A schools throughout the regular season. So it seems like Lures is always ready to go. I think, this year's a little bit different because, you don't have, like the last couple of years, Charlie Spiegel and last year where you had Carson Steele, you probably knew those two were kind of the favorites going in. This year, I don't know that there necessarily is that guy. I mean, Taven Jackson has won, a state championship under his belt. Center Grove doesn't throw a ton, though, so that's kind of works against him. And then Caden Curry may be the best player, but it's hard for defensive linemen, to win. And maybe those two being on the same team kind of steal votes from each other. So I don't know, that there's necessarily the easy pick this year necessarily, but normally as you see it, it's a team that makes a pretty deep run. And a lot of times it's quarterback, running back, receiver who shines on that team. So, there's definitely some good candidates out there. It's just maybe not as clear cut as we've seen the last couple of years.
Dylan, up your way as well. Like I said, Fort Wayne always one of the areas that competes well in football. What do you guys got up there that you think on the upper end is going to be shining out?
Yeah, I mean, the big name to watch this year, obviously Homestead's always good, and we've already talked about Lures. Dwanger's usually pretty good. But we have Carroll had a team last year where their offense is one of the most prolific in the country, and they return in their state. And they returned their quarterback, Jeff Becker, who threw, I believe, 8 touchdowns in a game once last year. So that'll be fun to watch. And then, of course, we have Leo up here. That's not in Fort Wayne, but that's Northeast Indiana. They have one of the better offensive lines in the country. They just had a kid commit to West Virginia, Landon Livingston. If you have not seen his commitment video, check it out. It's great. It's a lot of fun. He committed to West Virginia. And so they have a very, very good offensive line, and they just love to run the ball down your throat. So they're a team to watch as well, and it's going to be a lot of fun up here in Fort Wayne, as it always is. And we're looking forward to the football season.
Kyle, recruiting around the state of Indiana, these kids, it's becoming more and more diverse. Ohio State gets their pick, of course. If they want to come in and get a DeJuan Jones, they're going to come in and pluck him out or whomever. But Indiana is making it more difficult. Purdue's obviously getting a Joe Strickland shows that even though they've been down a little bit, they can still get disrupted a little bit. How have you seen the recruiting for these Indiana high school kids and the Indiana schools? Has there been any change in that balance of power?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I think Indiana is kind of building a recruiting monster a little bit with Coach Allen. And there's some real, recruiting momentum. You always hear about that, and it's kind of a hard thing to quantify. Well, all you got to do is look at the guys they're getting, and the star rankings is not always completely tells the story, but I think there's a higher quality of a player they're getting right now, higher quality of prospect, and there's a reason for that. There is some real, it's really, where it's got to happen on the field, to get kids to believe it can happen. And, I think by them going toe to toe with Ohio State and on the field, kind of says, hey, look at what we're doing here. Look at what we're building here. And obviously it appeals to a higher level of athlete, I think, in the state for sure. And, they're getting some guys out of state too that are higher quality players. So, you get I think Omar Cooper is a big get for them, and Caden Curry, I know, just visited there. And, last I talked to him, IU was really, not just on his list, but a real factor on his list. So, it's again, it can come and go, and it goes in waves, and you lose a assistant sometimes, and that changes the whole dynamic of recruiting. But it seems like right now they've got some good mojo at IU, and Purdue has been, they're much better off now than they were with the previous staff, I would say, as far as in-state recruiting goes. There was, some of the stories you heard previously. Purdue wasn't even, in the mix at all. They weren't even. It seemed like they weren't trying at all. That's definitely not the case now with in-state players. And you mentioned Strickland. That is a very good get for Purdue, and kind of a surprise. I wouldn't have thought that. I don't think he would have thought that to be the case even about a month ago or two. So getting him on board is a big deal. Very good player on the defensive line, but yeah, Purdue's, again, they've struggled a little bit on the field. They have to, you have to prove it on the field, and then, you can kind of get some momentum going for you again in recruiting. But like I said, it's a hard thing to quantify, but IU's definitely kind of moving in the right direction right now on the field and in recruiting, and it's paying off.
Yeah, I was a little surprised I was a lot surprised. I thought that the overwhelming pull of the in-state guys who were really working on him seemed like it was working, but obviously it didn't. And it shows again with recruiting, you just never know. But that was just a surprise pick with the momentum that heading in the direction. But it could be academics, it could be whatever specifically. But I was a little surprised. Dylan, you cover Purdue close. What did you think on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I was a little bit surprised as well. As we talked about earlier, he did seem pretty much not even just with Purdue, but with IU as well. He seemed like he wasn't planning on going to an in-state school originally. I think he said after he committed that he never really planned on playing in-state. But then Stanford was also in his top three, and he decided that if he went to Stanford, he would never be able to see his little brother play basketball. So he wanted to go somewhere closer, and I guess Purdue was the choice. He said that Purdue has, I think academics was a factor, Jim. He said all the programs that he's looking at, Purdue has a high-ranked program in those, so he has choices he can make. I think that was a significant part of it as well. But yeah, that's a big get for Purdue, because after a few down years for their team, they had a real run in 2017, 2018 with some really good classes, with some good in-state players. And they had some tough seasons in 19 and 20, and that had kind of recruiting had fallen off a little bit, obviously, not back to the Hazel years, but it had fallen off. And so getting him, maybe that starts to turn some of that momentum around a little bit again.
Kyle, what's up next for you?
I'll add to that too. I think Penn State might have been the choice for Strickland if they picked up a defensive lineman, defensive end there not long before he got down to making a decision. So there are times too where you might have an offer out there that goes away, or your situation becomes different because someone else commits ahead of you. So I think that was part of it too. And I talked to Joe a few times, and I definitely thought he was leaving the state. I didn't think he would be an IU or Purdue guy, and I really thought Penn State was going to be the pick up until about a month ago, and they got another commitment. So that changes things. Recruiting's so fluid sometimes that way, but yeah, got a lot of football stuff coming up, and some basketball recruiting stuff in the hopper. Getting our super team photos lined up this week, and actually have 2 of them are shooting Thursday and Friday. So we're going to be a lot of previews, and that it's that time of year to get everything kind of set up for the season.
You got to throw you under the bus a little bit. Wyatt wants to know, Kyle, why didn't you not at least mention Lagodi, Bar Reeve in your top rivalries article?
Because I'm a hater, I'm just a hater. No, we had our rivalries throughout the state. All of the guys in our what do you call it, Gannett, from around the state,
right? Family or whatever
stuff to that article, and so I kind of kept it local, just knowing different areas of the state were covered for the most part. So, but that is a great one. Bar Reeve, Washington too, is another good one. I covered that game, basketball game. They always play the night before Thanksgiving, and they about fill up the Hatchet House. But yeah, there's so many good. There's a lot that I like. Cathedral Chittard's another good one. I kind of left that one out too, and I heard some heat from the Cathedral and Chittard people about that, but it's all right. People are reading.
Yeah, there's several great ones. Jeffersonville, New Albany, Floyd Central. It depends on where you live. Always some great ones out there. What's up next for you, Kyle?
Like I said, just football preview stuff.
Oh, that's right. We did that.
Yeah, so we'll I got a Q&A with Paul Neidig coming up too that should be out here in the next day or so.
That'll keep you busy, man. I can't thank you enough. Appreciate you, and it's about to become your busy time again, which seems like it never slows down for you less than anybody.
No, but that's okay. We got a lot
job security, baby. Job security. How those Tigers doing, by the way?
They had a 7-game winning streak, and then they go to Kansas City and get swept. So that's kind of the story for Detroit. They can't stay out of their own way.
7-game streak. Yeah, that's good on any measure, though, man. Thank you so much, Kyle. We appreciate you.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thanks, Kyle.
Neddenriep from the Indy Star joining us here on Wednesday, as he does each week. Brought to you by Psalms. We're back with more right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington. Whether you're looking for
it'd be cool if his kid gets to go to the Little League World Series.
That's awesome, man. Good for him.
Hey, while you're talking, try unplugging that mic for a second.
Dylan, I think, just to be more specific, I don't know if you're actually speaking to your headphones in the mic. I feel like you might be coming through your computer. I just don't know if you can check in your computer settings where your audio is coming from, if you're able to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, it sounds real echoey.
Because I feel like if it was coming through your headphones mic, it'd be a little clearer because it's pretty close to your mouth,
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Speakers. Sounds. By the way, Jim, we should talk about the Crossroads Classic.
Yes.
Good call.
Also, Simone Biles is out of the individual as well. If we're looking for that as well. I don't see where. Let's see. News and interest.
Unplug
not,
it
maybe
for a second.
Maybe just try unplugging it.
Okay.
Unplug it.
It's unplugged now. Is it any different?
Did you
No.
unplug it from the computer?
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't sound any different.
You sound exactly the same.
That's
So
what
yeah,
I'm
you're
saying. I
coming
don't think
right.
it's coming
You're
through.
coming through you're coming through your computer. So you just need to go in to settings.
Yeah, I don't see where that
And
taskbar settings.
is there a sound?
Yeah, I clicked on sound earlier and it didn't really have what I was looking for. Let's see. Microphone. Microphone access for this device is on. That allows you to use your microphone. General.
Yeah, that's where mine is. It's through my sound setting or system settings, and then through sound.
Under microphone, let's see.
You hit something. Yeah, you just muted yourself. So
No, we can't hear you at all. Just go back to normal. We got 20 seconds left. It's fine.
Four-wheel drive lease for just $180 a month, or a new 2021 Honda Accord LX front-wheel drive lease for just $270 a month. Andy Moore Honda Bloomington, Bloomington's #1 Honda dealer.
Come see us at the all-new Andy Moore Honda, now in Bloomington.
This segment is brought to you by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington. Here's Jim Coyle.
welcome back on this Wednesday. Dylan Sinn is with us. I've got to tell Bentley I'm sorry. I told her she was a terrible driver, and she's not a terrible driver. She's a really good driver. I wish I hadn't said that. It upset her, and I am so sorry. So, Bentley, you are a great driver. The best driver I've ever seen, but it hurt her feelings, and I didn't mean to. She's a very good driver, and I wish I hadn't said it. It was mean, Dylan. I was mean. Sometimes you say things you wish you hadn't said.
Hey, Dylan, your mic's muted. Just want to let you know.
Oh yeah. You're
like on stream. Like there should be a little setting in StreamYard that allows you to unmute your mic right on your little logo.
Okay.
There you go.
There you go. Yep. You're back. Wyatt's giving the South some love. Let's see. Oh, he's talking about Southern Indiana. Yeah. Earlier when we talked about that Bar Reeve comment. There's a lot of what about Peyton Bledsoe from Lagodi? Not sure. It's a lot of great rivalries around the state. A lot of great rivalries up in the northern part. I mean, it doesn't matter where you are, man. There's some great rivalries. Everyone has more affinity from ones you grew up with. That's just the way it is. Some things mean more to you. Jackie Young from Princeton winning gold in a 3-on-3 basketball. Is that over? Is that a complete?
It is, yeah. That's over. They won the gold. I mean, that's really exciting. Like, I'm not sure how much you guys have watched 3-on-3 basketball. It is really, really exciting. And I love that they added that to the Olympics. Obviously, Robbie Hummel has been in the past part of the 3-on-3 men's team. But yeah, Jackie Young, Princeton, Notre Dame. Good for her and good for the United States getting another gold medal here.
Well, one where they won't be getting one is with Simone Biles, as she has withdrawn from everything, I believe.
She's withdrawn from the individual all around coming up here next. So that's the next thing for her. And she decided that, I believe she said she was going to take yesterday to kind of look at it and decide. But yeah, she is done. So she still may compete in an individual event like the vault and things like that, but she is not doing the all around, which is next up. So I guess there's still more decisions to be made.
And I'm like, I don't want to get too deep into it because I don't know a lot about it. So it would be speculating, but I'm speculating that this is mental health driven, which I'm not sure exactly is too much pressure. What's going on, but why now? Why does this manifest itself now at the Olympics during competition? A lot of questions, really. I mean, you've got people while Simone Biles is obviously the best in the world, other people that could be there, that could have been prepared. There's just so many questions, and I'm not, like I said, I'm not looking to get into all that, but it's our society is becoming softer. It sure seems like that's a case, but different generations see things differently. This is not something that would have happened before, but of course now we've seen it twice in a matter of a short period of time with Wimbledon and now the Olympics, major sporting events. It won't be the last, Dylan.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And we heard Simone Biles. She talked about it yesterday about how she tried to push through, and after the first vault that she did yesterday, she knew that it just something wasn't right. Or not yesterday, I guess 2 days ago now. It's hard to tell with these with times because the time zone is so different. But yeah, she tried to push through, and she just realized that something wasn't right after that first vault. And I thought it was interesting. She talked about kind of getting out of the other competitors' way with the team all around, because the United States ended up winning silver, and it seemed like they were headed to maybe a lower finish if she had kept going, because she knew that she didn't really have it that day, and her withdrawing allowed them to put someone in because it's four competitors and all around, 3 of them go in each rotation. And so they were able to put someone in her place that was able to do better than she thinks she would have. And that helped the United States get silver. So she feels they would have done better. They did better than they would have if she had kept going. So I thought that was interesting as well. And it's kind of different than what we're hearing. And like basically, she quit on her team, blah, blah, blah. And that doesn't seem like that's the case. It's more like she knew that she wasn't going to do well. And her getting out of the way allowed the United States to do better than it would have.
Yeah, but and I'm not calling anybody out, but isn't part of the echelon of athletic competition the mental aspect? I mean, that's the huge part of it, being able to push through that. It's a drain. That's why champions are champions, and not being able to get through that part of it, to me, that's like having an ankle injury. But treat it like an ankle injury. You get through what you can get through. Again, I'm not trying to call anybody out, but to me, it's the same. And you have to push through that stuff at this level, especially when expectations bring expectations.
Yeah, and I mean the thing is with gymnastics, I mean, as with any sport, it requires at the highest level, it requires such a precise coordination of everything, and if you're off by just a little bit, it's going to affect you. I mean, even with an ankle injury, right? If you have an ankle injury that is just there are times the difference between hurt and injured, right? We hear that all the time. It's a football thing, but it applies to other sports as well. If you're hurt, you go out there and push through. If you're injured, if you go out there, you're going to be hurting your team because you really can't be competing, right? And it seems like she was more injured, right? Not obviously it's a mental thing rather than a physical thing, but it seems like she was more on the injured side, where she felt that if she kept going, she'd be hurting her team rather than going out there and helping her team even more by just pushing through. And I think that's the decision she made, because not only for herself but for her team as well. And that's the way she's described it in the last 36 hours. Obviously, we don't know what happened behind the scenes, but that's the way she's described it, since doing it for herself and for her team.
And as Tony says, respectfully, until you or I walk a mile in her shoes, none of us are in any place to say she is soft or not. I'm not saying she's soft. I didn't say that. I said society is getting softer. A problem can hit at any time. It doesn't run on anyone else's schedule. Quite truth to that. No disputing that. But, man, when you're an Olympian and at the Olympics, that's the epic of the competition. And I don't know. This is just not something that it's a new injury, I guess you'd call it, that in sports. Has it been around before? Sure, it probably has. Have people gone through things they wish they hadn't? Probably. But they've gone through things physically they wish they hadn't. We talked about those two-a-days from back in the day. Let me tell you, there's nothing that made me hate life worse than that. Question, why was I there? I remember all that stuff. It was brutal. but you push through things because it gets you places. And I just it seems a little weird. Derek says by them scoring her differently than the other gymnasts, this is absurd. And I absolutely don't mind her leaving. I think there's more to the story than what's being told. Quite possibly. That's another thing. Letting out bits and pieces of information. We don't know. Is there another side to this story? Don't know.
Yeah, like, and that's the thing, is we don't know, and that's why it's tough, because obviously this is a massive story, and she was expected to be one of the stars of these Olympics. Now she obviously won't be, at least for the time being. And so you want to talk about that. You want to have something to say. And of course, there's some things you can say at this point, but it's tough, because there is probably going to be more information that comes out, and she talks about it more and explains the reasoning a little bit more here over the next weeks, months, even years, if she looks back on this an hour long. So it's tough, because of course, that's our business, right? We want to have a take in the moment, and right now it's hard because we don't have all the information, but we still have to get the takes out there, because that's the job.
Yeah, and we'll continue to follow that as it goes forward with that, as the Olympics are on. Are as many people watching the Olympics, I wonder?
I saw like 13 million watch the opening ceremony. I don't know what the ratings of the Olympics are like overall. I know it's tough because of time zones and things like that. So last night you had Katie Ledecky racing twice, but they both, one of them started at 9:30, the other was at 10:50 Eastern time. So it's tough because a lot of people are in bed, and you get it on tape delay, and and people are watching it on streaming services. So it's a little bit hard to do traditional ratings with these Olympics. So I'm not sure exactly. But it's challenging to figure out how many people are watching compared to other years.
We got Crossroad Classics information to talk about later on. Bob Kravitz will join us, but we might as well start in on that a little bit. The Crossroads Classic news with that. Dylan, what is your take there?
Well, basically, it seems as though the paper in Lafayette, the Journal and Courier up there, they reported that Mike Babinski, the Purdue athletic director, had told them that the Crossroads Classic will not continue past 2021. So they're planning on having it this year and not further. Obviously, that has not been confirmed yet, but I did see that Scott Dolson gave a statement to the Indy Star where he didn't confirm it, but he did reaffirm Indiana's commitment to playing games in Indianapolis overall. So even if the Crossroads Classic ends, he wants to continue playing games in Indianapolis. But yeah, I mean, it's tough because it's an event that was a great idea when it first started. Indiana, Purdue, Butler, Notre Dame, kind of playing on the state of basketball type reputation for Indiana. And the last few years, though, Notre Dame and Butler have not been quite as good as they were when this event started out. They've become, Notre Dame hasn't made the tournament for quite a few years here. Butler hasn't made it in the last few years, and they're just not up to the level that IU and Purdue are, especially IU, which has won this in this tournament 4 years in a row. And so it's not providing the quality out of conference game that it was before, especially we talked about this with Archie Miller, but when he was still the IU coach, about how it's a little bit tough now with 20-game Big Ten schedule, where this is just something else that's making it difficult to schedule games. So there's a lot going on, and I'm sure we'll talk more about it with Bob.
Yeah, the Crossroads Classic, it just started to lose its luster. It did nothing for, say, Indiana. It did nothing. Recruiting-wise, you're gaining nothing. Actually, you're losing a lot because you're not able to participate in some of the bigger marquee events that, say, Michigan State and Ohio State had been able to participate in. And frankly, these networks had wanted Indiana for, but they couldn't because they were contracted into this Crossroads Classic. But that should be going away. As Dylan mentioned, Bob Kravitz will be joining us next, and we look forward to talking to him from The Athletic. We'll do that right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Hey, Hoosier fans, Hello, Bobby.
Hello, Jim. How are you?
I'm good, sir. How are you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm over at Colts. They start practice here at 10 o'clock.
All right. Hey, Bob.
As soon as we're done, hey, man. As soon as we're done, I'll be heading out to watch Carson Wentz and hope that nobody has COVID.
No one besides Frank Reich, you mean?
Well, did you see a number of players already on the COVID list?
Really, a number?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Let me. I won't. I don't think I'll lose you here. Hang on a second. There was an email that we just got. Let me see if. Well, they signed Braden Smith, so that's good. TJ Carey, Al-Qadim Muhammad, and Xavier Rhodes are on the reserve COVID-19 list.
Well, that's in addition to Frank Reich being on there, right?
Right.
So the head coach isn't at camp so far, and players are out, and it's the whole thing.
Yeah, it's nuts. So if you want to talk about that, we got the NBA draft is tomorrow.
Yeah. NBA draft, baby.
Excuse my weird angle here. I'm in the Indy 11 room trying to frame myself. I'm not quite sure how to do it, but there I am. Okay, that's better.
It's picking up, man. Big Ten Media Days, football camp, Colts camp.
Yep. I finally got shit to write about.
It's on.
I saw that. Who was it that drove in in an Indy car yesterday?
Oh, Kenny Moore.
Yeah,
that's sweet. But what's his name? Reggie Wayne did that a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
we need something new. Huh. I mean, Reggie Wayne came in a helicopter once. I mean, he's had great arrivals.
Someone's
got to come in parachute. Someone's got to parachute in.
Parachute, yeah, that might be a contract issue. But
I was gonna say, Colts would not allow it, baby. I saw him to come in a bubble.
Huh. I saw Malik Hooker sign with the Cowboys yesterday.
Yeah, he's still got a chance to be really, really good. That's a good pickup for them.
I mean,
he just needs to get healthy.
He was good in Indianapolis, right? Like, as long as he just wasn't healthy. But if he gets healthy, there's no reason to believe that he can't be a good player.
Yeah. All right, we got 15 seconds. Need to bring us back in.
Listen to craft beers and all of the right foods to go with. Plan a day on the links at Eagle Point in Bloomington, then stay for dinner at Sam's Clubhouse. Sam's Restaurants, professionals in the art of food and drink. This segment is brought to you by Sam's Family of Restaurants. Fresh, local, family. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington. Here's Jim Coyle.
Welcome back on this Wednesday. We are halfway through the week. Bob Kravitz from The Athletic joins us from Indianapolis Colts camp as he is ready to dive into that as that is getting started. Bob, how are you, sir?
I'm tremendous. Getting ready to go see if Carson Wentz can throw a football.
Yeah, straight from last time I saw you was the Big Ten Media Days last week. Now the Colts camp starting. Everything, the machines are starting to move.
And as a journalist, I can now feed the beast because there are things to write about. I don't have to pull columns out of my left ear. So
well, that doesn't.
We got the NBA. We got the NBA draft tomorrow too.
Yeah, that does not seem to be a problem right now. Coming up with content, of course, you're at Colts camp. Start there. Things get ready to start. Carson Wentz, the new era there. A lot of things going on, of course, behind the scenes with Coach Reich and all of that. But at least it's here.
At least it's here. It's kind of. I was just talking with Zach Kiefer, one of my colleagues at The Athletic, and there was just a story that 3 Colts players are on the COVID list. And I just told him, I said, dude, it's going to be a long year. You know, I mean, when your coach who's been vaccinated starts out on the COVID list and then 3 players are on the COVID list before we even get started, this is not a good sign. And this is a team that's got 60% of its players vaccinated, which is among the lowest, if not the lowest percentage in the league. So that's really problematic. And it would be a damn shame. Well, first, if anybody gets sick, but, concomitant with that is, this might be the difference between being a really great team and a team that falls short. And that would be a shame.
Yeah, it would. I'm looking forward to everything getting started. Looking forward to all the camps getting open, including IU football, the colleges around as that gets kicked off. Even high schools, everything's getting ready to get going. So we're all excited about that, getting to get out and go to games again. That'll be exciting for the fans. Hopefully we get back to that if things stay the way they are. But what's it like out there? There's got to be a lot of excitement, a lot of questions. You got a new quarterback.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's first, it's great that the fans are here. Let's start with that. They won't be able to, get autographs and do the usual things that they've done in the past, but at least they can come and watch and connect with the team. And I think that that's great. Look, there are a lot of questions. There are questions about the secondary. There's a question about who's going to handle left tackle while Eric Fisher, comes back. There are questions about the pass rush, how quick Kwity Paye and people like that come along. But ultimately, it's about Carson Wentz and whether he can recapture some of that magic that he had when he previously worked with Frank Reich. I guarantee you, you're going to see every stat imaginable. Every time Carson Wentz scratches the back of his head, it's going to be a tweet.
Huh.
Dylan,
that's one of my favorite genres of tweet is the reporters all writing about literally everything that the new acquisition does during camp. I'm sure you're familiar with that after years on the beat, Bob.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, like when with Peyton when he started out, I remember. This was pre-Twitter, pre-internet, for God's sake. But when John Elway came to the Broncos, as their pick, and literally the two newspapers would fight over who was able to figure out what he was having for lunch. They fought the newspaper war over the Elway watch, and they had a column every day, Elway watch, and they literally chronicled every little thing he did.
So we talk about a 24/7 media market nowadays. Maybe it's not so different than it was in the past.
Maybe not. It's just a different forum. But yeah, Carson's going to be in the crosshairs. There's no doubt about it. And it can't help that his head coach is not available for the first couple of days. But I think that's something small that they can surmount. The problem is how many of these guys are going to get sick. How many of these guys are going to get caught up in contact tracing? When you got 60% of your team vaccinated, it's a recipe for disaster. Trust me. I hope to God I'm wrong, but I just think this team may have taken itself out of contention with its decisions that it made this offseason.
Have you heard anything about whether that Reich getting sick has kind of changed not sick, but testing positive has changed anyone's mind on whether to get vaccinated? Is that anything that they've talked about?
We only had access to players yesterday. We talked to 8 of them. Five were vaccinated. One was on the fence. Oh, no, one had one shot and the other 2 had not been vaccinated. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people are going to say, well, he got vaccinated. He got sick anyway, so why should I get a vaccine? I think it garbles the message. The truth of the matter is, if 59-year-old Frank Reich had gotten the COVID variant and had not been vaccinated, God only knows what kind of health problems he would be dealing with right now. You shudder to think about it, but how many 59-year-olds, I don't know if he's got any pre-existing conditions, but end up on a ventilator or fighting for their lives, wishing they had taken the vaccine. So that's the real story, is that the vaccine basically helped save Frank Reich from a very serious situation. But I think a lot of players are looking at it the wrong way.
The Pacers apparently have turned down a trade involving, Kuzma. And we've got the draft coming up tomorrow. So perfect time to segue to that. Number 13 pick. Pete says the Pacers turned down a Kuzma trade. He thinks they need more than that to improve the team anyway.
Oh, yeah, they do. They do. It's going to be interesting tomorrow. Now, This is the highest they've drafted since Miles Turner a couple of years ago. They took him at 11. I don't think they're going to keep this pick. I think ultimately they're going to move it and somebody else for help, maybe as a wing defender. And I think there are other options for them. I would be, if they do stay where they are, I think it's going to be Corey Kispert, the kid from Gonzaga, because I think they're going to lose Doug McDermott in free agency. That said, you look at some of the picks at that point. I mean, Devin Booker was a 13. Kobe Bryant was a 13. Mitchell in Utah was a 13. Giannis was a 15. So those kinds of guys, if you do your homework and you get a whole lot lucky, you can find those guys in the draft. But, it's highly unlikely. And I do think they're going to end up making a deal. I'm going to keep my eyes open to deals in the next 24 hours.
We'll certainly see how that goes down. Conference realignment now a topic again, as it was a few years ago, as officially Texas and Oklahoma they're heading to the SEC. We know that that's a done deal. When that actually happens, we won't know. To be sometime between now and 2025, probably happening before, but that's going to probably lead to change elsewhere.
Big Ten.
The Big Ten. Yep. That leaves them, as crazy as it sounds when you mention USC and UCLA, it's about TV markets. And
of course,
that would give them the top 3 TV markets. If they could go out and create a Big Ten East-West per se, they already have a relationship with the Pac-12 of sorts.
Sure.
It's craziest thing that I would have ever heard if you had said it to me 2 months ago, probably, but not anymore.
We're going to learn a lot about Kevin Warren here in the next little while. Yeah. Look, tell me, Dustin, if you think I'm wrong, or Dylan, tell me if you think I'm wrong. I think Bob Delaney would have done this in a heartbeat. Jim Delaney. Why am I getting first names wrong? What's wrong with me today?
There's too many of us.
Delaney, I think, would be very proactive, and I think USC and UCLA would be part of it. I don't know enough about Kevin Warren or his history to say one way or the other, but I think it's pretty clear that everybody, it's musical chairs, and you better jump in that chair when you get a chance.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't think Kevin Warren is a fool, essentially. Like, I think he sees which way the wind is blowing. He knows that the SEC is trying to create essentially a mega conference, and the Big Ten is going to have to basically adapt or die. And I think that that's going to involve taking some teams maybe from the Big 12, maybe adding Kansas as a basketball school, things of that nature, and then trying to get to the Pac-12 and see how that goes. Although the Pac-12 is not going to be happy about that either. So we'll see how that goes as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. You're right. It's an adapt or die situation. Sorry, I just got kicked out of the Indy 11 room.
But I'm wondering, is Kevin Warren, is he seeing how the winds are blowing, or is he being blown by the winds? Last year, it looked like the Big Ten was being caught with their skirt up. And again, are they being caught with their skirt up? Johnny come lately. There's, the teams that are left in the Big 12, not exactly high banking teams there. I mean, the Texas is the crown jewel, and Oklahoma would be the next in that. Kansas, the only thing Kansas brings to anybody is basketball. The rest of their athletics program, it stinks.
It just makes me laugh how the NCAA, they've been brought kicking and screaming into the NIL conversation, and yet everybody's just trying to get rich, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it just strikes me that we're looking at conference expansion and all this sort of thing, and yet the NCAA spent millions and millions of dollars to get beat in the Supreme Court 9-0.
Yeah.
Yep. And lost all these years, lost all this time.
Absolutely.
And instead of setting themselves up, they've set themselves up for collapse.
Yeah. Talk about being blown by the wind, right? Like that's the NCAA has been doing that for the last 3 decades. It was very clear that this was coming at some point, and the fact that they fought it and fought it and fought it, and apparently made almost no preparations for it to actually happen is just absolutely absurd to me. It's something that I'll never understand.
They have been sticking fingers in the dike for 30 years. That's all they've been doing, sticking fingers in the dikes and trying to hold this wall back. And you're not going to hold it back. And now it is collapsing on top of them. And now they are really underwater as far as control. They're not losing money, I guess, per se, but they are the control. And the more control you lose, the more control you will continue to lose.
Yeah. Look, the NCAA has, will we still have an NCAA 10 years from now? I don't know. I don't know that they serve much, if any, purpose. I mean, maybe somebody smarter can fill me in, but I'm not sure what purpose they serve.
Yeah. And that's the thing is a lot of it is basically we don't know what's going to happen in college sports in 3, 4, 5 years. Like there is so much unknown right now. I remember 10 years ago around, or it was 2010 where we had that big wave of conference realignment and things rose and fell. But generally the haves and the have-nots stayed the same. And the status quo was more or less preserved. We got a little bit closer to like the playoff and things like that. But I think we're going to see even more significant changes here over the next three or 4 years that no one knows what direction it's going to go. The college sports is going to look almost entirely different at this time, 3 or 4 years from now.
Yeah. I remember the good old days of the Big 8, and I remember when the Big 10 actually had, let me think about it, 10 teams. Yeah. It's been crazy, but you know, you gotta roll with the changes.
Yes. So where does college athletics go? Because it is going to continue to head in a direction because everybody wants theirs. Like you said, it's about getting rich, and everybody wants theirs. And on the football side, people are tired of seeing Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State. That's why the clamoring for 12 teams. The Pac-12 is getting no love. The Big 12 was getting no love, so they want in on the party. Even some of the Big 10 teams, Penn State's, Wisconsin, went to however many straight Big Ten championship games, but no love. There's going to be change because everybody wants to be a part of the party, but that doesn't solve all the questions. And super conferences, how are they going to manage that? It's just a lot of questions. The more things that happen, the more questions that seem to come with it.
Absolutely. No, absolutely.
Dylan, if college football, you followed it as well for this. Where is this? Any chance we go to like a regional thing? But it's too late. The conferences are being set. Contracts will be set. So it's almost a possibility.
The thing with contracts is that they're set as long as people want them to be set, and there's always a way to get out of contracts, right? Like the Texas and Oklahoma, their contract with the Big 12 is through 2025. But there's a good chance they end up playing the SEC in 2022 just because the SEC is going to throw a ton of money at it and say, hey, let's get this done, right? So you can always change if it seems like there's an opportunity for expansion or for someone to make more money. But yeah, I think we're kind of headed toward maybe 4 conferences that are much bigger than they were. I think that seems that would be the least radical solution, I feel like. Of course, the more radical one is basically the SEC absorbs a whole bunch of these teams, and the Big Ten has to really absorb a whole bunch of other teams as well, and we get basically 2 conferences. But that's really radical, and it's going to take a lot to get there, especially with the Big 12 and the Pac-12 kind of fighting that tooth and nail the whole way. So there's a lot to work out. No one really knows at this point. It's almost impossible to speculate because there's so many different ways this could go. But basically, things seem like they're going to change significantly over the next few years here.
And Bob, the majority of all of this is on the east side of the Mississippi River.
Say again?
The majority of all these teams we're talking about are on the east side of the Mississippi River. But Texas, Oklahoma, obviously not. But there's just not a lot coming from the Pac-12 when you compare it to the Big Ten, and you add in the SEC. You add Clemson and Notre Dame into that. Everything is on the east side of the Mississippi River.
What does Notre Dame do? Do they join
Nothing.
a conference, or do they just keep doing what they're doing?
That's a great question, because I mean, since Texas and Oklahoma decided they were going to the ACC, it seems the SEC. It seems pretty clear that the ACC has put on kind of a renewed pressure campaign on Notre Dame to say, hey, we want you here. And Notre Dame has a deal with the ACC where if they join a conference, it has to be the ACC. They have that in their contract. As part of their deal to play the sports in the other conference with the ACC. Of course, again, that could change if the Big Ten makes them an offer they can't refuse at some point. But Notre Dame, they seem like Jack Swarbrick and Notre Dame, they value their independence above just about everything at this point. Obviously, that could change. But right now, the difference between independence and joining a conference is a couple $1 million a year, and they're willing to pay that because they have so much money coming in. But they really, really value that, and they think that's a big part of what makes their school special. And so it's going to take a lot to pry them out of that stance, I think.
Well,
they make
as they said during Watergate, follow the money.
Yeah.
They make $15 million a year, basically, I think, on football from NBC.
Right.
Why would they not be so far ahead being a member of the Big Ten and getting $50 to $55 million a year from their athletics program, so their entire athletics program?
That's the question right now, right?
It would actually increase, because you add Notre Dame to that and you add another team, that's going to increase 65 million a year.
And again, like that's part of the issue right now is they're kind of locked into joining the ACC, and so any increase of money they would get from this deal with the Big Ten, if they ever made that deal, would be you have to pay the ACC to say, hey, we have this deal with you, but we need to break this deal, and you're going to have to pay some money to go there. So that's part of that calculus as well.
I mean, Maryland did that. I think Maryland has borrowed money against their Big Ten money a couple of times, or Rutgers. One of those two programs has borrowed money against money that they're supposed to be receiving. I think Maryland was just in horrible athletic shape, financial shape, when they left to come to the Big Ten. And the ACC offers very, very little. On the football side, you've got Clemson, and that's it.
Yep.
There is not another good program in there, and that's unbelievable that their TV contract, what's that going to be? They can't be making tons of money in the ACC. They're a basketball-led conference.
The ACC has had this dream for a while of basically recapturing the 90s with Florida State and Miami, and it just has never happened. I mean, Miami seems like they might be good this year with Derek King a quarterback, but that has kind of been the dream for a while, is you take Florida State and Miami, if they get back to where they were, and add Clemson into that, and you get basically three teams that could be in the top 10 every single year. And that just hasn't panned out. Florida State was good for a few years there, and that was good for the conference, but then they fell off and Clemson became good. So you've had basically continuously in the SEC, you've had one team that's good for the last 10 to 15 years.
Bob, how's the golf game?
It's mediocre as ever.
That's me. I'm this close to being mediocre, baby.
Well,
we all
have to have goals in life, Jim.
Well, Bob, I appreciate you joining us, man. Have fun out there at training camp. The opening up that at Colts camp. We'll look forward to talking to you about it next week.
Sounds good.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you, Bob Kravitz from The Athletic. Make sure you give him a follow. We've got more coming up here with Dylan Sinn and myself. Stay tuned. We're back with more right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington. Whether you're looking for
Hey, y'all should take this segment to do Crossroads Classic so I can get a clip out of it.
Sure.
I know you all are planning on doing that with Kravitz, but he ended up doing Colt stuff.
Colts and alignment. Yeah, I don't Jim, I don't know about Notre Dame. Like, I absolutely agree with what you're saying about the fact that the Big Ten could offer them a much better package than the ACC could, and a much better package than what they have now with their individual TV deal. They really seem to think that independence makes them
with the 12-team playoff, it will now.
Right.
But it just cracks me up. It's like Bob just said. Well, who's Notre Dame? Exactly. This is not the frickin' 60s, man, the 40s. They're still living like this is the four horsemen are coming out of that tunnel. Like Newt Rockney is on the sideline. He's not.
They have made the playoff 2 of the last 3 years. It's not like they're irrelevant.
But they shouldn't have. They shouldn't have. They should not have made the. They should not. They had no business in the playoff the last time. And it showed.
That's
they
not
got
really
their
true.
ass handed to them.
Well, yeah, but so did Texas. Like the other.
But I knew they were going to get their ass handed to them because they saw. I'm like, they have no business in there. They had no business in there. That's why it's a horrible setup. Horrible. College football is a horrible setup. I knew that team had no business in that playing in a championship, and it showed. I mean, that's the best you got. Don't even send them if that's the best you got.
They did better against Alabama than Ohio State did. I thought they looked much better against Alabama than Ohio State did.
Yeah.
Like that, I mean, Alabama was a juggernaut last year. Like the other team that was plausible to make that game was Texas A&M, who Alabama had already blown out, right? Like they at least get like it was between those two, and I guess Cincinnati. And like, if you're telling me that Cincinnati would have kept it close with Alabama, I think I'd say you're probably crazy too. So it was
to me they had their chance with Clemson. You only play one tough team, and it's Clemson. And
they split with them. You know, they won the first time, and that was the best win of the whole year up until Ohio
without
State.
their quarterback at home.
The backup threw for 500 yards,
and he's now their starter this year.
He is.
You let a backup throw for 500 yards.
Backup who's going to win the Heisman next year.
But you have to understand too, with those big teams, Ohio State, Clemson, their backups could be starters on so many other teams.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm going to bring us back in.
A month, or a new 2021 Honda Accord LX front-wheel drive lease for just $270 a month. Andy Moore Honda Bloomington, Bloomington's #1 Honda dealer.
Come see us at the all-new Andy Moore Honda, now in Bloomington.
This segment is brought to you by RE/MAX Advanced Realty, Indie Home Pros team by Cheryl Sizemore. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington. Here's Jim Coyle.
Welcome back. Indiana Sports Beat Radio coming to you on this Wednesday. Dylan Sinn joining me from the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette. Plenty to get to. We were just wrapping in the break about what were we talking about?
More conference realignment and where that's all going, because there's just so many directions it could go. You talk yourself around in a circle essentially, because there's just, you don't know. It's basically one of the most opaque processes that you could possibly imagine, because it's all happening in back rooms. It's almost the cliche of a whole bunch of guys in a back room smoking cigars and trying to figure this out. And that's basically what this is going to be for the next probably 6 months to a year, is just people meeting with each other, people talking, the power brokers in college football trying to figure out the next phase of this. Because right now, again, with Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC puts so much in flux, right? It might change a lot. It might change hardly anything other than the Big 12 kind of ceasing to exist as a power conference. We don't know. And that those are discussions that are going to have to be hashed out over the next several months here.
Do you set it up to where you keep conferences if you have multiple entries? Is there a limit? Do you limit conference to 2 entries?
It's possible, right? I think the SEC is going to be like, the SEC is now the biggest voice in the room, right? And like, they're the most important voice in any room they're in, and they're going to fight that tooth and nail, because I think basically everyone else is going to be aligned and say, hey, we don't want the SEC dominating it. We don't want it to become the SEC tournament, right? We want people to get a fair shot. The SEC is going to say, hey, if we have the best teams, we deserve to have them in there. Right. And so that's going to be a significant struggle. I think that's kind of one of the second order effects we've already seen from this decision of Texas and Oklahoma to move, is that it throws that. I mean, this committee spent a year and a half talking to people and putting together this proposal for a 12-team playoff that they thought was going to be the most effective way to get this done. And that playoff is set up for 5 power conferences, right? And so now everything about that is in flux. They're going to have to go back, not quite to the drawing board, because it does have some things that can work with 4 conferences, with the 4 buys for the conference champions. But yeah, there are things that they're going to have to go back and rehash, things that they think that committee probably thought they had settled already. And it puts that whole playoff back into flux. And it seems like that's going to be the next question mark here, is where does the playoff go and how does that shake out?
I mean, if you're going to go to 12, the SEC, Big Ten, it doesn't matter, but they could get as many as 4 in.
Yeah. Like,
because you still have to have, because the reason I say that is because that still leaves 8 slots. Okay, we'll take 2 from the Big Ten, 2 from the ACC, 2 from the Big 12, 2 from the Pac-12. That's only 8 teams. So, of course, you've got the
group of 5, right?
Yeah,
the whole point of the playoff, the whole point of the 12-team playoff, the way it was set up, was to give a group of 5 teams that go undefeated a chance. Make sure you get Cincinnati and Coastal Carolina in there, and so the question is what happens to the Big 12, the remainder of the Big 12 teams. I think that's the most important thing right now. Are they going to exist? Are they going to be scattered to the wind? And if that's the case, then what happens to them, right? Do they form their own conference that is a non-power conference? Do they just kind of stay the course and say, well, we're going to build around Texas Tech and TCU? Do they try to make some overtures to some teams from the Sun Belt? Do they let Houston in to the Big 12 now and try to get something out of that, that kind of thing? And so that there are a lot of question marks about where they go. It seems likely to me that they kind of scatter to the wind, but we don't know.
There's just no way the Big 12, the Pac-12, or the SEC can measure up to the SEC and the Big 10 on either side of the ledger. Yeah. The ACC is a basketball-dominated conference. They can hold their own with the Big 10 in basketball, of course, much better than the SEC in basketball. Pac-12, no, not in either. Big 12, no, not in either. The SEC and the Big 10 are already gigantic when you look at these other conferences in size, in success, in value, in everything. Yeah. It is a very, very skewed landscape now between the Big 10, the SEC, and everybody else.
Yeah. And I think one person who deserves a lot of credit for keeping the Big 10 kind of on par, at least in reputation with the SEC and not letting them fall behind the way the Pac-12 kind of has, is Jim Delaney, because he was the one that kind of really pushed for, and there were a lot of people in this, but he was one of the ones that really pushed for the Big 10 network, which has turned out to be a massively important piece of this. The Big 10 network was kind of the first of its kind, and when everyone realized how successful that was going to be, the SEC launched its network in partnership with ESPN, and those two have kind of become the standard for what a conference network can be. The ACC is getting there. The Pac-12 network hasn't really gotten off the ground because of a whole bunch of different issues. But basically, the Pac-12 tried to copy, and it didn't work because the Big 10 was there first. And I think that's a huge part of this, is the Big 10 was an innovator in TV.
But I agree with you, Jim Delaney, innovator in every sense. He is why the Big 10 is the leader in revenue generating conferences today still. But with his departure, it left a vacuum in the Big 10, and Kevin Warren has not picked that mantle up. He really seemed to fumble the ball last year quite a bit, and this year he seems to be juggling that ball. I don't know where the Big 10 is and where they're going. Nobody does. He didn't give a lot of direction at the Big 10 media days. Is this the Big 10 is not going to drop off into the categories of the Big 12, the Pac-12, or the ACC, but they are certainly at a place to where they can continue to rise or stand pat. And if you stand pat, you're going backwards to me in this situation. So they have to do something. You cannot stand still, I don't believe.
No, I think you're exactly right. This is a time where, especially now, you need to be proactive. I believe that Kevin Warren is doing things behind the scenes that we're not seeing. And of course, that's the thing, right? We talked about it at the beginning of this segment, is how opaque this whole process is going to be. I mean, Apparently, what we've learned is that Texas and Oklahoma were talking to the SEC for 6 months before the news broke a couple weeks ago.
Oh,
and
yeah.
The only reason that it broke when it did, it seems like, is because the SEC told its members, and Texas A&M was like, "Oh no, people need to know about this because this is bad," because they're mad at Texas joining the conference. But yeah, there's going to be it's probably going to be a lot of silence and a lot of rumors, and then a lot of things are going to happen all at once, which is what happened back in 2010 during the last real run of realignment. And it was just one thing after another, but it took a little bit. There was kind of a calm before the storm period. And I think we're kind of in a calm before the storm period right now, where the first dominoes have fallen, but we're kind of in the middle where we're waiting for that next domino to really get touched and go over. So there's a lot of ways this could go. And of course, the Big Ten is going to need to be proactive. They're going to need to look and see, what do we want the Big Ten to be? What teams strengthen that brand? And how do we get them to join? And those are the questions that are going to be asked here.
The good thing is, whatever teams that are out there will probably calmly wait for a look by the Big Ten, because you're not going to go to the SEC and go get your head chopped off playing football. You're going to go join a league that's got all that in there? Nope. No. And then especially when you have the Big Ten isn't a lot better there, but it has money waiting. So, and it's the prestige, and there's probably only going to be 2 teams that gets in. Yeah. It's just who those 2 teams will be.
Yeah, and that's the question. That's the advantage of being who the Big Ten is. That's why it's advantageous to be one of those power conferences, even above the Pac-12 and the Big 12, is that everyone's taking your calls, right? If you want someone, if you've decided that you want to target someone, they are going to pick up the phone and at least listen. And if you have a good pitch that makes financial sense for them, there's a good chance they're going to pull that trigger. That's not really the case with some of these other conferences that there's a lot of different moving parts about how much prestige they have and how much they can offer going forward. And the Big Ten, there are not nearly as many questions about that in the Big Ten. They are an established brand that has a lot to offer just about any team that's going to join. And so it's going to be possible for the Big Ten to kind of wait out some of these teams and say, okay, who's available? Who do we want? And then those teams can get a call.
And that affects things. There are so many things that's going to affect. The stronger a conference is, the stronger name, image, likeness becomes for players. The stronger brands can become, like an Indiana basketball brand. You're still growing that. And so that can be something that's very enticing to players. You already have a network. So again, there are things that are enticing, that can be used, all kinds of things that this sports landscape is changing, and it's changing fast, right before your eyes. We got more coming up. We're going to talk about the Crossroads Classic, as it will probably most definitely be going away after this year. We'll talk about that and much more right after this on Indiana Sports Beat Radio, brought to you by Andy Moore Honda.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Hey, Hoosier fans, whether you're looking woo, baby.
I do wonder how much football is obviously driving all of this, right? This is a football-driven decision-making process. But men's basketball brings in a whole bunch of money too, especially for the Big Ten. And I wonder how much you have to look at that if you're the Big Ten. Do you try to go get Kentucky from the SEC, right? Do you try to bring in Kansas? How much of a factor does that play, right? Because
the Big Ten is very picky when it comes to academics.
Are they though? Nebraska was not a.
They were in it. They were AAU member when they joined.
That's true. Yeah.
And the only reason I think they got booted is because their medical school is not in Lincoln or some bull crap.
But yeah,
they were in it for like 102 years or something.
Yeah, I had forgotten about that whole saga about how they got booted from the AAU. Oh, good lord!
The only school to ever get booted from the AAU.
Okay. You can make a case Nebraska is no longer a football power because they were booted from the AAU.
Well, they're not a football power, and they got booted from the AAU.
What's the line? Correlation is not causation. I disagree. I believe that one caused the other.
Exactly.
Yeah, because you have to have some at least thought of how this is going to affect basketball. Because right now the Big Ten, I would say, is the premier basketball conference in the country, and that's not nothing, right? Like that's an important part of your brand as a conference, is not just being a football conference, but being all around athletic excellence.
Well, they didn't exactly show that in the NCAA tournament last year.
They didn't. But it was pretty obvious throughout the year of how good some of those teams were, especially during the non-conference schedule where they just beat everybody. You know, we've talked about that too, about how that was the worst possible scenario for them, was to get all those teams in and then have them all lose.
All right, I'm going to bring us in.
Family, meeting for lunch, hanging with friends, or on the golf course, Sam's Restaurants has multiple locations and something for everyone. Sam's Restaurant in Fishers has homemade coffee cakes and much more. Sam's Place in Broad Ripple has wings, tender steaks, and seafood. Sam's Ale House in Carmel and on 86th Street in Indy have a long list of craft beers and all of the right foods to go with. Plan a day on the links at Eagle Point in Bloomington, then stay for dinner at Sam's Clubhouse. Sam's Restaurants, professionals in the art of food and drink.
This segment is brought to you by Bubba's 33 in Clarksville. Pizza, burgers, beer.
Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington. Here's Jim Coyle.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio. I'm looking at something. Is that Wrights' new stadium that I'm looking at? Is that the Wrights Bowl? Holy cow. If it is, that is mind-boggling. The Wrights Bowl, if you're familiar with, down in Evansville, long time football facility down there where the schools played. I'm looking at something on Twitter or on Facebook that they got new turf there. And if that is the case, that stadium is fatter looking than it ever was. Yeah. Wow. Yes, it is. Evansville, Vandenberg school system. Man, that's the best. It is check that out. That is good looking, man. The Wrights Bowl. Yeah, it's definitely gone under some renovations and changes. They've got new turf down there. Ooh. Herman Byers Field.
Had they been natural grass before and they've gone to turf now? Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like I'm wanting to say, is the Wrights Bowl one of the stadiums they filmed a league of their own in?
I don't know.
I don't either, but man, that's a cool looking high school stadium. You betcha that is. And it goes back to the fact of talking about the sport of football in Indiana, how it continues to rise. My old high school has turf now. There's a lot of schools with turf, which I'm like, what? It's crazy, but the sport of football is definitely continues to be on the rise in Indiana. Basketball, the Crossroads Classic. How long did that go on?
Since 2011.
Too long.
Was the first year of the Crossroads Classic. Some people, yes, would say too long, and it's kind of outlived its usefulness. As again, we talked about earlier, Notre Dame and Butler of 2021 are not Notre Dame and Butler of 2011, right? It's not that they have not quite lived up to the standard that Indiana and Purdue especially have set in this decade. And so it's tough, especially with Indiana. They've won this thing 4 years in a row. Indiana has currently the best record out of all of the teams in the tournament in the event at 7-3. And they've won 4 years in a row, but it wasn't really gaining them anything in terms of national recognition, right? Like they were beating teams that weren't going to go to the tournament or were going to maybe be a lower seed. So that there was for Indiana and Purdue as well. It was, what are we gaining from this? Especially with a 20-game Big Ten schedule, where that's decreasing your opportunities for out-of-conference games, and then taking one of them and giving it to this Crossroads game that wasn't gaining you a whole lot and could lose you a significant amount, especially in the minds of in-state recruits. What is the gain here for Indiana and Purdue at this point?
Yeah, I said that a long time ago. That's the thing. It gained Indiana. Not only did it gain them nothing, it really cost them. They were not able to play in big time events that they could have been playing in. Could have been playing on a carrier, but they're playing in the Crossroads Classic. Could have been playing against UCLA, but they're playing in the Crossroads Classic. It did them nothing. It did nothing. 0-0-0. And those teams don't need Indiana. Purdue, Notre Dame, Butler, they don't need Indiana. Indiana doesn't need them. That's just not it sounds good on paper, but it just, yeah.
It sounded much better when all four of them were Final Four contenders, right? And, I mean, Indiana has not been a Final Four contender for the last few years, but you get my point, where all four of them at the beginning of a season could have gone to the Final Four in any given year, and that was the case for the early part of the 2010s. But I mean, the other part of it too is that you're not necessarily going to take Butler and Notre Dame off the schedule every year. You can play Butler in the Gavitt games, which is Big Ten, Big East. You can play Notre Dame in the ACC Big Ten Challenge, where you couldn't have in those events before. So you still might get to play some of those teams on a semi-regular basis. It's just you're not going to play them every single year or every other year. And so I think that's a significant part of this, as well as you want to play teams in your state because that's fun for the people in your state. It's fun to get your fans to travel to somewhere or vice versa. And those games aren't necessarily going away. They're going to have opportunities to play Butler and Notre Dame going forward, even assuming the Crossroads Classic does kind of go away here.
Tony points out missed out on CBS Champions Classic, and Brent points out even more so, this is the best one. Indiana drove 75% of the revenue across that tournament, but they were only received a 25% split. So, they're driving that train, but they're paying for 3/4 of the fuel. It just wasn't a good deal for them. And like I said, it just did not do them any good. Didn't help them recruiting. It did them zero good in any way possible. So this is nothing but a gain to me. As the truth joins us, Robert Carter, how are you, sir? But I think this is a gain. It's a win-win. It's another situation where Indiana can start to get back to being a national brand, which is what they need to be and stay. And this is another step in that.
Yeah. And I think it's I always go back to 2012 in this Crossroads Classic when Indiana was ranked number 1 and their first loss of the season came against Butler in this Classic. That's just not happening anymore. Butler is not going to knock off the number 1 team in the country. It's been a while, right? So that's something that it kind of shows where the programs have gone in the last few years here.
I mentioned a minute ago. I mentioned was the Wrights Bowl where they shot some of a league of their own, but as Jennifer and Dwayne both pointed out, no, that was Bossy Field. So many great fields down there in Evansville, but cool. But you can still go back and watch that movie, and man, it's been a while since I've been to either of those stadiums, but great stadiums down there. Getting back to what we were talking about, though. Which was what
the Crossroads.
Yeah. It is like 5 years past its usefulness. I mean, it is not like just the last year or so. It is thing, and it always takes long to get out of that stuff. But scheduling wise, now is Indiana ready to turn that schedule over? I'm sure that the networks will be clamoring for that opportunity for an Indiana, because Indiana is still a name, and with the newness, CBS will be reaching out. They'll be looking for those kind of marquee matchups. That's where they make their money. That's why they do those classics. That's why you play on the aircraft carriers, because people tune in.
Yeah, exactly. In Indiana, now obviously it only took up one portion of their non-conference schedule, but it does open up some opportunities for Indiana. And again, we talked about this earlier, but Scott Dolson said yesterday, and he didn't confirm that the Crossroads Classic is over, but he did say he is committed to having Indiana play in Indianapolis. They want to play games in Indianapolis, and that's important to them as part of their branding in state, right? And so you might see some games that are scheduled in Indianapolis, maybe against a Kentucky, who knows? But that's something that is going to be emphasized going forward, is making sure, even without the Crossroads Classic, if and when it does go away, that you're still playing games in neutral sites in Bankers Life.
Do you think the networks are not going to try to push that game?
Yeah, I think there's a significant possibility that is the next place this goes, where someone sits down and remember. We've talked about this for a decade, right? John Calipari doesn't want to play IU because they're still mad about the watch shot and storming the court. But they've deliberately rubbed it in IU's face that they're not going to play them. But John Calipari is probably not long for that job at Kentucky. Like, he's been there for more than a decade. He said when he started he wanted to do 10 years. It's been more than that now. When you get a new coach in there, assuming that it's someone who does not have the same feeling about IU that Calipari does, then the discussions on that game get reopened pretty quickly, I think.
The only thing I think that has kept Calipari around now, because he was going to be gone, when it looked like the age was going to change to go to the NBA, that they were going to have to be forced to make that change. Well, now the biggest thing is the transfer portal. Well, that's revitalized his life, because now that means, I don't have to recruit again, just like it used to be when Nike did all the recruiting. Now I don't have to do any of the recruiting, just wait to pick up the transfer portal and just act like we're a minor league team again and just rebuild that. So that gives him some life to stick around. You don't have to do recruiting. He lost his coaches that actually did the recruiting, went out and got a couple from Illinois. So he could have a couple more years because of that. That could extend his deal, the transfer portal, unfortunately. But if that does, that could mean no Indiana-Kentucky game. I'm surprised that Kentucky's AD at some point would say, look, this game needs to happen. Get over it. It's time for you to get over it. This is bigger than you. This is not about you and your massive ego that you got your ass whipped. Get over it. I mean, somebody needs to tell him, get over yourself.
I mean, eventually, I think the point about the AD is a good one, because in many ways, John Calipari is the most powerful man in Kentucky's athletic department, even above the athletic director. But there's just so much money to be made from Indiana playing Kentucky. It's so much money is being left on the table by that game not happening. And I mean, they're having some fun not doing it just because it's making Indiana mad. And I think that having done that for however long is going to make when it actually does happen, just that much more intense and that much more interesting. And there's so much money on the table to be had for this game that eventually you kind of have to say, hey, let's just get this done, right?
Well, and I'll be honest too, though, it's been kind of fortuitous for Indiana that it happened when it happened, because if they were playing during the Archie Miller era, it wouldn't have been funny. It would have been disgusting to watch how badly those beatdowns would have been. So Kentucky had an opportunity to probably take that series and run with it from a series standpoint, but they didn't. And now they're going to allow Indiana to be back on even par if and when that series resumes. No doubt that Indiana will be back to where they used to be. So, which will be better for the fans. So, it could have been a blessing in disguise that there was a hiatus when it took place, because that hiatus has taken place during Indiana's hiatus of being a solid program.
I think that's a really good point, because if they had played these games in 18, 19, 20, maybe Indiana does lose some of those games pretty big. And then you have Kentucky saying, well, why should we be playing this team that's not any good? And you're kind of just reset to, why do we play IU, right? So I think you're right. It was a blessing in disguise for IU that it did happen when they were experiencing a down period. And now if Indiana starts kind of getting back to at least being a contender in the Big Ten, winning 20 to 25 games on a relatively annual basis, then you start to say, hey, this is a game that really could matter for a lot of people.
I still just want to get back to seeing the game. It's a game that should be happening. There's just it's like the Yankees and the Red Sox not playing. To me, this is. I know that Louisville and Kentucky think their series is the biggest. Duke and North Carolina thinks theirs is. To me, Indiana and Kentucky is just that's how it should be. They were playing longer than Louisville and Kentucky were. I don't care that they're in the same state. That doesn't mean jack to me. I just these are still two of the bigger programs. Louisville is not what Indiana is. As much as they'd like to be. They've had some success, but that does not, they're not in Indiana. And these two programs should be playing. Hopefully we'll see that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think that's part of it is what you just touched on. I'm sure a lot of the fan base feels that way, is that Indiana plays Kentucky. That's just the way it is. And that's the way it was for a lot of fans for a very long time. And the fact that it hasn't happened in a while is pretty jarring, right? Like that's a game that used to happen and people used to sit there, watch to it as a big part of the non-conference season, and not having that game anymore is just a little bit different, and people want it back because it was a nice part of every season leading into the Big Ten schedule for IU.
Man, if you're a fan of Better Call Saul, they're filming that right now. My Bob Odenkirk, who stars in that, apparently taken to the hospital after collapsing. I love that show. One of my favorite shows. It's a prequel to oh my gosh, Breaking Bad, which was also one of my favorite shows. Awesome. In its sixth, I think, final season. So, but hope he's all right. But just happened to see that come across. Hate to see that. But what else? What do you have going the rest of the week? What's going on with you?
Yeah, I mean it's kind of what Kyle Neddenriep said earlier, was basically just getting stuff ready for high school football, and then of course getting things ready for college football. College football camp starts basically the end of next week for IU, Purdue, Notre Dame. So it's going to be full bore after that, and basically from then until the end of basketball season in mid-March, everything is a go, right? Like there's no more kind of waiting around and preparing for things. We're in the middle of it, and so we're getting close to that.
Yep, we are. We were talking about the going away of the Crossroads Classic a minute ago. Tony mentions play the Kentuckys, Kansas, UConns of the world like they did in the 80s and 90s. Yeah, the non-conference schedule used to look a lot more fun, but also there was not the ACC Challenge. There was also not the Big East Classic, whatever, all that stuff that you have going on. But they weren't locked into this as well. So, yeah, it would be nice to see. I like the non-con schedules of years past. They just seem to be a little more fun. But now teams want to get those money games in, get those wins in. They want to get those 10, 12 home win games in. It's all about that and the dollar and getting those 20 wins.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the name of the game right now, is figuring out how to get to an acceptable number of wins and make sure enough of those wins are quality games. And I mean, obviously, there's years when you're not going to be able to do it because your team isn't good enough, but other years you know your team is good enough and you're just positioning yourself to make sure that you get a good NCAA tournament seed because of the teams you play. And I think that's kind of what IU is looking at going forward here.
RBL Sprint says Netflix is coming out with a Malice in the Palace documentary next year. Is that right?
Yes, it is. I did see that, and it seems like they're kind of a lot of the people that were in that game participated in this documentary, so it's going to be extremely interesting.
Yeah, and it is, because Meta World Peace, whatever you want to call him, he seems like such a docile guy whenever you see him talking and interviews and whatnot, and to get wrapped up in that, something so crazy. Those guys, you wonder why it never happened before, but it's not happened since. But that was just that was a crazy time.
Yeah, it's I mean, again, a lot of Pacers fans are quick to point out the Pacers had the best team in the NBA that year, and there was a very real chance that they won a championship at the end of that season if that had not happened. So it's not only very interesting in that context, but also interesting for how that changed the NBA landscape going forward.
Absolutely, man. Well, I can't thank you enough. It's, as always, been fun as it can be. What do you have coming up next that people need to follow up on at the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette?
Yeah, of course, we'll have plenty of previews of IU football, Purdue football, anyone that's interested, Notre Dame. I will have all of that. Anything you could possibly want to know about the upcoming season, I will have for you. So make sure, go to, as you said, www.journalgazette.net. I also want to shout out real quick, the Journal-Gazette won the award, the Blue Ribbon Award from the HSPA for the best daily newspaper in the state of Indiana just last week. So we won that for the first time since 1990. We're very proud of that.
As you should be.
Yeah, so we are very proud, and we're excited about that here at the Journal-Gazette. So I just wanted to give that a shout out to all of my colleagues that made that happen.
I would say so, man. That's awesome. Congratulations. That's why we have you on, man. We have nothing but the best, baby. Nothing but the best.
Of course, it's all about quality here.
That's right. A big shout out to Kyle Neddenriep from the Indianapolis Star, who did not win that award. The Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette won that award, not the Star. I'm kidding. Thanks to Bob Kravitz from the Athletic, as always, as well. Looking forward to tomorrow. Dustin Schutte joins me, Chris Denari, Matt Taylor. We'll see what else we can get scared up as Colts camp's going on and everything else. But until then, thanks to Dylan Sinn and John, the producer, but most importantly, thanks to you guys. Without you, there's nothing else for us to do. Until tomorrow, I'm Jim Coyle. I will see you on the radio.